All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Zach Twardowski here with Aaron Lance. Say that correctly, right?
You did.
Cool. So Aaron is the Chief Revenue Officer of Ethos, and I messed it up earlier, so I'll make sure I say the correct thing because Chief Revenue Officer is the more fun version than CFO, essentially,
That's
right?
true.
Cool. And we just opened our office in Austin, so Aaron was kind enough to come down and spend some time with us. I know you have a super busy schedule, and I asked her to do a training today and then to spend some time sharing with everyone who was not able to make it, kind of what your background looks like and I got everyone that talked today. I think people got a lot of good feedback from, but the most good feedback I got was from your story, which I think is really cool because you're super humble. You have a background. I know you don't like when people talk about, but you went to the most prestigious business school you could go to in Harvard Business School. And I'll let you share, everything that goes along with that, but you have a really amazing background and you've been very successful, but you credit a lot of that to being started out in sales in your business career. So I'd love for you to kind of share with everyone, and we can go back and forth, but your journey from, why you decided to go to business school, why you decided to do sales, and then, where that's kind of taking you to in life now. I think it'd be awesome to share with everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. I had so much fun here. It's an amazing office, so much energy.
Brings you back to when you were selling, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I loved that time. And I'm super excited to see this new generation of people diving in. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And it's cool. I mean, before we jump, it's really cool I think even since I've started doing sales 7 years ago in insurance, we were doing paper applications in homes and I was flying across the country to see people. We weren't doing telesales. There was no Zoom sales. And working with companies like Ethos that have progressed the industry tech-wise, like you guys have amazing technology, but also you're forcing other carriers and other companies to build better tech to keep up.
Yeah.
So to see where the industry's come from to where we have 50 people out there all selling over the phone, all electronic apps, mostly instant decision, that's come a long way from, 30-page paper applications 7 years ago that required an underwriter to view every single piece of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the things I'm really passionate about is I've worked in a bunch of different industries where agents are trying to sell important products to consumers, and it's just really hard to do, right? And the systems and legacy infrastructure that exists makes it harder. So to be a part of a company that's trying to transform that and make agents' lives better, make consumers' lives better with a really important set of products, it's really fun and it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you go through your story a little bit? And I think what was cool watching everyone out there is as you were talking, everyone who's in like our kind of entry level type sales, doing insurance sales, building teams, I think they were all like, oh, like I'm gonna have so many career opportunities later on if I get really good at this skill. But I'd love for you to kind of share what you shared earlier with everyone as far as your backstory and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So when I got out of undergrad, I went into consulting, which is just like a generic way of learning about a lot of different businesses and learning from smart people. And I learned a bunch of just the core skill sets, like how to do spreadsheets, how to build slide decks, and how to talk to people in a professional setting. So great people, but I didn't actually get to do a lot of the work. You make recommendations and then you move on. And so my first interview for my first job outside of consulting was at a mortgage company called Countrywide. And they basically wanted me to do consulting work, but for them. And so I was lucky enough to have the then president of that mortgage company take me under his wing, and I acted like his chief of staff. And so I followed him around and got to listen in to a lot of senior level conversations and did all sorts of different projects, basically whatever he asked me to. But this was, it was a corporate job. So I studied a lot from him. He learned what it took to run a mortgage business across all these different verticals within the industry. And mostly I got to know all of the senior executives at the company, and whatever they needed, I was there to try to help figure out whatever solutions to those problems. And
I have a quick question real quick. So someone asked me a while ago, like, how did you get to be around such good mentors? Like, how did they, like, I feel like people just picked you to mentor you. And I was like, no, I just always like forced myself into the room. Was that kind of the same thing with you? Because I think a lot of people, I'd love to, I know we're going to go all over the place, but I'd love for you to talk about like how you got around the right people, like how you put yourself in position to be around the right people. Because I know for me, it was, no one like asked me to be there. I just showed up and tried to provide value. Like Andrew's a really good example. I moved to Las Vegas to be around him because he was building a big business. And I was like, okay, what can I do for him? And if I had to ask him, that doesn't really help because he has to think about it, right?
Right.
So I was like, I'm good at selling. Maybe I'll help some of his guys sell more. Then they'll tell him, hey, this Zach guy's not so bad. And then he'll want to help me, right? So I'm curious, when you were getting mentored and kind of the chief of staff, how did that relationship develop to where had access to all these really smart people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think the kind of relationships that you built with Andrew, that you cultivate here at FFL, is really unique.
Yeah.
And you kind of hand over mentorship as part of the model. And I think it's a really important success factor. Most places are not like that.
They tried to hold on the information
Right.
to themselves, right?
Right. And you really encourage that and celebrate that and ask people to ask for help. That really wasn't my experience. In a lot of ways, I feel like I just got lucky initially by finding this president who saw something in me and gave me a chance. And then it was around gaining his confidence by doing great work. And from there, he leaned on me more and gave me more access. And then, some people, I think it's also about spotting like what you can respect in them and who they are. And so, I saw how he treated people. I saw how he solved problems. I saw the judgment that he brought to complex decisions, and I really respected that, and I wanted to learn that. So, I asked him as many questions as I could and, tried to be as useful to him as possible, and then he just kept giving me more and giving me more. And when I think about it with the other executives that he had, some of them I connected with, others I didn't. I did not look or like anyone else on that floor, right? It was actually like frustrating and kind of embarrassing. They called me the kid because I was like, 20 years old, wandering around. These were 50, 60-year-old guys, all guys, right? And I was the one person in the room that just didn't fit. Some of them were pretty dismissive of me, but other of them just took an interest in me. They're like, who is this girl?
Yeah, like why are you here?
Why is my boss's boss leaning on her for all these things? And so I learned a lot from them. I respected a lot of them tremendously, and then built personal relationships with them, built professional relationships, and then a lot of them started to look after me.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting because after Countrywide kind of imploded, those executives scattered across to many other, mostly mortgage companies or other financial institutions, landed in really senior roles, and they continue to be good friends and mentors of mine many years later.
Yeah, so just building good relationships with people and you weren't expecting anything out of it. You were just building good relationships with people you could learn from.
Right.
That's one thing. My father-in-law gave me some good advice a long time ago. He was when I started doing this, he was like, people that have done really well like to share what they've done because they like to hear themselves talk. And he's super smart. He worked at NASA. He's head of land development for Exxon now. Like he's a very senior job at Exxon, and his job is basically to help negotiate and do clean ways of pipelines, right?
Okay.
He was like, successful people like to talk about themselves. You just have to ask.
Right.
And they like to tell you what they know because they want to kind of brag about it. But they like teaching young people who are ambitious too. And I remember like when I first got into business, I was like, what advice do you have? Because he'd been successful in business, and he was like, just ask the best people and they'll tell you everything that they want to know if they like you,
Yeah,
That was great advice.
agree with that.
Yeah.
People are really generous with their time and advice. Most people really do want to help you.
Yeah.
I don't actually think of most of those people as mentors. I call them mentors now, right? When you ask me about them, that's a role that they served. But I just viewed them as people I worked with, right? And they had more to offer me than I had to offer them, but I still was looking for how can I help them?
Yeah.
And I can do this project for them. I can answer this question. I can teach them about something more modern and cool than that they didn't understand yet. And that was my way of giving until I had more to give. And then they were very willing to give back.
Yeah, and that was the key was that you didn't have to go, hey, what can I do for you? You just did stuff.
Right.
I think because I've had a lot of people ask like, oh, hey, how can I help? Like, and if you're busy, if people are like, how can I help you? And you're like, I'm busy. I don't know how you can help. I got a lot of stuff going on, right? Just do stuff. And
just watch.
When you have people that start just taking things on without you having to ask, you're like, oh, okay, that's someone I'd really like to reciprocate with, right?
That's great.
So once you were at Countrywide, what led you to go back to school and then decide to get into sales?
So when I looked around the executive suite, and I asked all these guys, what their path had been, almost all of them had come up through sales. And I think that's true in a lot of financial services organizations, true in a lot of businesses. Sales is where the money is.
Yeah.
If you want a path towards leadership, you really have to learn how to run a P&L, right? Manage the profit and loss of a company. And so I wanted to start where they did. One day, I aspired to be a CEO. That was true back then. It's true today. And so if that was the path to leadership, like I wanted to get on it.
That's awesome. And then so you went so you decided to go back to business school, and then what was your first job like after that, and kind of how did you jump in? Because you said you think you're the first person from Harvard that sold mortgages right after you graduated Harvard Business School, right?
I think so.
I think I'm gonna get you a plaque that says that, like first person to ever take this job after Harvard Business School.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, but I loved it. So this was my plan before going to business school. I arranged a deal with Countrywide to pay for me to go to business school, and I owed them time, 2 years on the other side when I graduated. And as part of that deal, I said, I want to come back, but when I come back, I want to get into sales for the reasons we just talked about. And after a little bit of convincing, the president finally agreed and said, that's kind of crazy, but I understand where you're coming from, so let's do it. We'll talk in 2 years. So actually, in like my summer internship between first and second year of business school, I was in a branch selling loans as a loan officer. And that was my first foray into it. And after I graduated, like hit the phones.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said you had a couple opportunities to do like really higher leverage sales, or some, I guess some direct sales, or you could have done, consumer sales essentially, right? Or you could have done brokerage sales.
Yeah, there's different channels in the mortgage company. So you imagine you could sit in a branch and wait for people to come in. Those might be more complex cases, or you can be in a call center and you can just take calls or outbound calls all the time, and a few other options. Some advice that I got, which was great, was go to the one with the highest velocity of sales, because the speed at which you learn is dictated by the speed of the number of deals you get, the number of at-bats you can take.
Right.
And I thought that was really great advice, and even before I really understood how good of advice it was, because if you just spend day in, day out structuring deals, hearing a customer's problem, you just learn very quickly how to pattern match, how to adjust your style, which personas you're working with. And after not that much time, it starts to become second nature, and you can get more creative.
Yeah, that's what we were talking out there about. One of the agent I've worked with for the longest, Easton. He's so good now. He's a big team. He's probably sold cumulatively in 5 years $5 million of insurance. He sells a ton. He has great persistency, great business, and he's a great leader. But he was the example we talked about out there. I remember when he was new, his first week he had 40 people he met with, which is a lot in insurance, and he sold one of them, right?
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do to help him besides say, do it again. And then the next week he had 40 appointments and sold 2 of them. And he was like, man, I spent a couple $1,000s on leads. I didn't even break even.
Yep.
What should I do? I'm like, I've never seen someone do this many appointments and fail. Do it again. And then I found some other people who were better at coaching and they could help me out. But then after 3 months, all of a sudden he went from being the worst agent on our team to he was literally the best agent on my team. And the only person on our team selling more than him was me at the time. And I'm like, the only reason I'm selling more is I have a 1.5 year head start. Like this guy's picking it up super fast.
That's amazing.
But he went through 120 appointments in 3 weeks, where normally it takes people 3 months or 6 months to get through that many appointments.
Yeah.
And you just figure it out. You don't even need the best coaching. You just start to, if you pay attention at all, you start to figure out body language and verbiage and what people buy from you, what people don't buy, what you say that turns people off. And you just figure it out if you're paying attention.
Right. If you're paying attention, you're collecting feedback and you're adjusting each time. The rate of learning just accelerates the more practice that you have.
So you said you jumped into sales right away. You were quickly the highest selling person in the office. I guess 2 questions, like how quickly did it take you to become the best salesperson there? And then how long did you stay in that role before you started being asked to manage teams and moving up that ladder?
This is a long time ago, so I might get the dates wrong. Longer than you might think. This was in 2007. It did not take me long to be the top salesperson. I will say that.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe a couple weeks in, I was outselling pretty much everyone. I remember maybe the tipping point when I actually got some confidence was I sold this one deal, and I was talking to this guy with this very thick Southern accent, and he was like, "Sweetheart, that was awesome. I love talking to you. Guess what? I have 3 more properties I'd like you to refinance for me." So all of a sudden I got 4 deals in one day, and it was like unbelievable. Those are more deals than like most of the people on the floor had gotten that month. So anyways, from there, like I didn't really look back.
And then what was your journey like from there to kind of where you are now?
So that was a couple of years through Bank of America, kind of working my way up through sales. And then eventually I was running the direct-to-consumer purchase business for Bank of America. So sales centers and also kind of running our overall strategy for how to build that purchase business for the bank. And I was thinking about transitioning to another part of Bank of America after I came back from maternity leave. And as part of that process, I started kind of looking around for help to update my resume because I hadn't interviewed for a job in a really long time. And so I went back to my consulting firm called Boston Consulting Group, and they have great resources for people, for alumni. So I asked for advice, updated my resume, and I saw this posting for a company called Zillow. And so I reached out to them. They were looking for someone to lead their new mortgage business. And I said, like, hi, I'm not interested in this job, but I'm a BCG alum, and I know mortgages, so if I can be a resource, let me know. And then a few weeks later, I quit Bank of America and moved to Seattle to join Zillow.
And then you ran the mortgage department there for a number of years, right?
Yeah, for 10 years.
Wow.
So Zillow is an amazing company, and I feel very fortunate to have joined when I did. This was about 2010, I guess. And it was a private company, about 100 people, and we were just sticking our toe into mortgages for the first time. And over the next decade, got to build that business. And for Zillow, mortgage business ended up being 3 different businesses. One was a marketplace connecting consumers with lenders. Another was a B2B SaaS business where we were selling software to lenders. And then the third was we bought a mortgage company and vertically integrated, and we're actually selling loans ourselves towards the end of my tenure there.
Wow. So one thing I want to ask is, I think a lot of people probably told you like, oh, this is a male-dominated industry. How did you not let that intimidate you? Did you just never even think about it? You're so driven it didn't ever cross your mind? Or did you ever doubt yourself? You're like, there's all these guys. Can I really make it in this kind of cutthroat, male-dominated world?
It was and is male-dominated. Yeah. I didn't know any different. I definitely always felt like the odd one out in that regard. But I think you have to just not let that bother you. First of all, and in some ways it's a little bit of a mind game. Sometimes I played with myself until I got comfortable, which was like, this is an honor to be here, right? Like, and by me being here, it's not going to be as weird for the next woman to be in this room. Yeah. And so it's a responsibility and a privilege that I take. And so reframing it in my mind that way.
You turn it into a positive for yourself. Yeah.
Made me feel really proud to be in those rooms. And I'm really proud now as I see that myself not being the only woman in those rooms. We still have a long way to go in life insurance in particular too.
Right.
But we're making progress.
Definitely. I think it's cool. Like, Deborah, my wife's a doctor, and I've asked her the same thing. Like, hey, this has generally been a male-dominated industry. And she said, I never crossed my mind. I always wanted to be a doctor from the time I was a kid, and I didn't care what people thought about that. I was just gonna be a doctor. And I feel like you were kind of the same way. You're like, I'm gonna be a CEO. I don't care if people think it's funny or, like they patronize me. Like, whatever, I'm just gonna do it anyway.
Right. And I'm certainly not gonna let this be a liability for me.
Yeah, you can use it as an asset. I remember when early in business, a lot of people were like, how are you able to, sell older people or like lead people that are older than you? I remember I asked some mentors like how I could do that when I was younger, and they're like, just make it into a positive. You're younger, you have more energy, you have more time, you're better with technology, you're more innovative. And I started trying to flip everything that people saw as a negative into how can this be a positive for me?
Yeah,
I feel like you do the same thing, right? Like I stand out because I'm the only woman in this room, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's true. People remember me because I'm so unusual, the person who shows up at these conferences and things like that. So you might figure out a way to make it play to your strengths.
What advice would you have to people who are looking at different industries and looking at getting into sales? Like, if they want to have any jobs like this, how long should they focus on learning the basic sales skills? And is there any other advice you would have for them getting started, where people maybe they want to take the traditional route and kind of climb the corporate ladder, or they're like, do I do an outside sales job and kind of skip the line? How should they attack that if their ultimate goal is to be a CEO or a business operator or leader at some point?
So the way I usually think about it is it's not sure, it's great to have a long-term plan, but it's very difficult to map out the interim steps and how long you'll spend in each one of these things. I mean, maybe you were able to do that and knew
Nope.
exactly what lay ahead after which milestones, but I certainly didn't. But the way that I think about it is, whatever you're doing, kick ass in what you're doing, and that will unlock new opportunities for you.
Yeah.
And when those opportunities come, people will look to you because they know that you are awesome at what you're doing. And you might also, in the course of doing that, discover a new path that seems more interesting you didn't understand existed before.
Yeah.
And just keeping your eyes open for those opportunities, like you're saying, asking people that you respect what they're doing, learning from the past that they followed, and then figuring out what speaks to you.
Yeah.
And then the timing has to work out for whichever company you're at, or your financial situation, so you can build something on your own.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier too that sales sometimes gets a bad rap, but you thought that, I don't want to butcher it, but you thought that the perspective you had was super helpful from a consumer standpoint and from a leadership standpoint. Can you talk about that for a little bit too? Because I talked to some people who want to come in and they're like, I just only want to build a business. And I'm like, man, if you sell, it's so much more powerful. And I'm like a dumb jock. So my example is always like, if you have a football coach who never played, most people who played sports don't respect that coach the same way as the one who did play.
Right.
But you talked about it a lot better and a lot more universal way as far as, why you think it's advantageous to have sold before.
Yeah, I mean, I think sales is an incredibly valuable way to start your career, or an important portion of your career, for a few reasons. One is what you're alluding to, is just this empathy that you're able to develop, both with sellers, but also with your end consumers, whether that's a company that you're selling to, or in our case, it's a consumer buying some sort of product from us. And until you know what it feels like to day in, day out, talk to those consumers, you hear their stories, you hear what they're scared of, you hear the kind of simplicity sometimes of the questions that they ask you, you hear the willingness they are to share with you, how vulnerable they are. Those conversations build an empathy that's very hard to manufacture until you really put yourselves in their shoes, and you have to meet them where they are and convince them to buy whatever it is that you're selling them, which hopefully is something you really believe is great for them, which I did. And the products that we sell are very important. But building that kind of empathy is the foundation for building intuition. And a lot of what I do today is figure out, what will help us grow this business? Like, what do consumers want, and what do agents want?
Yeah.
And it's only by putting yourself in their shoes that I think you can really appreciate what that's like. And there's no shortcut, right? You have to really listen to people, do it, sit in there, be in their situation over and again before I think you can really understand what it's like. And the same is true from an agent's perspective. Like, it's hard to really appreciate what it's like to work 100% commission, what it's like to talk all day and be so exhausted from talking to clients that you can't talk to your family. Right? Like, those things are really hard to understand until you sit down and do it.
Yeah, I remember when you said that out there, I think I saw everyone like shake their heads the same, because everyone's been there where they get home and their husband or wife wants to talk and you're just like, I'm so burnt out. Like, I just want to put on some mindless TV and try to decompress for a little bit. And I remember like having to explain that to my wife. She's like, are you mad at me? I'm like, I'm mad at everybody right now. I just want to talk to no one for like, give me 30 minutes to decompress and then we can talk.
Right.
But it's very real, right? And like you said, it helps you be able to coach and talk to your managers and your agents and you know where they're at and you can remember where they're at. That's why still, like, once a year, I'll go sell for a couple of weeks just because I want to get back and remember what it's like. The other thing I've noticed too, maybe you've noticed this, is whenever I get back into the sales rhythm or I spend time with my guys selling, I have empathy, but it also allows me to cut out the excuses they give. Because like sometimes you have empathy, but sometimes you're like, oh, you're just making silly excuses because you're not making enough calls. So every once in a while I go back in and people are like, oh, the leads suck, or this sucks, or that sucks. And then you jump back into it and you're like, no, I don't have empathy for you. Like, I have empathy for the guy that made 500 dials. You made 100 dials.
Right.
And so it also allows you to check your people if you're willing to get into the trenches with them.
Yeah. And I think about that a lot in terms of actually using, we're a technology company, using the technology, right? Until you get there sitting with an agent, or you are an agent and you're playing with our portal and you're trying to use the tools, like, that's when you really see like, oh, this feature is kick ass, or this is not, like, what were we thinking? We need to refine this. Like, go talk to the team.
Well, that's what was cool with building like the IUL product we built with you guys is you were like, hey, like let's test this out. Let's test with a few agents. Hey, what do you guys think about this? Oh, we messed this part up. Let's fix this part.
Right.
Let's relaunch it. And it's been a really successful product with us, I
Yeah.
think. So.
And it keeps getting better.
Yeah.
So we keep asking you guys, what can we do better? You keep showing us things we didn't realize what could be new opportunities for us to improve it, or things that were inadvertently, we could have done better, and now we can fix it.
Right, and it's funny because you ask salespeople what they want, and they'll give you everything that they want, right? And then you have to kind of play the middle game, like, oh, like what can actually be coded? Like what can the engineers actually do?
Right.
Compared, because the salespeople will convince you that they want this, 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 and this, and how important it is, right?
Right.
And then engineers, you have to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So
Right.
it's kind of a funny balancing act that we play with you guys.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's true.
You're like, let's open up the idea department. I'm like, are you sure? Because these guys will have ideas for you, for sure.
Well, that's part of my job.
Yeah.
Like, sit in between the two.
Right. You're like, okay, let's not do all of that. Let's do some of that. So for the last couple minutes, you want to go over, I guess, like what attracted you to Ethos and kind of what your guys' overall mission statement is in the insurance industry?
Sure. Yeah, so when I left Zillow, the bar was high because Zillow is an amazing company, and I feel privileged to have had the chance to work there. So when I was looking for the next opportunity, there was three things that I prioritized. The first was conviction in the growth trajectory of the business. Like, I had learned at Zillow how much fun it is to be on a rocket ship, and with growth comes opportunity. So I was looking for a place where I really believed in the growth potential. And when I saw Ethos and I saw the quality of the tech that they had assembled, and when I looked at the quality of the investors that they had assembled, it became really clear to me, even though I didn't really understand life insurance yet at that time, all of the smartest people in the investment community who were lining up behind one company, and that was Ethos. So that's what gave me the conviction, even with less familiarity of the category, to say, this seems like a really smart bet.
Yeah.
And then I met the people, and it is the most talented, smart, ambitious, but very humble and kind group. And that's a very unusual combination. I think Family First Life has a lot of that DNA as well, and that's part of why our cultures have really gelled and we've made such good personal connections so quickly. But it's an amazing team. And then I was looking for a place where I could have an impact, and Peter and Linky, our co-founders, and the broader team really welcomed me in, and I felt like I would be heard. I felt like I had a lot of unique experiences and skill sets to contribute and could really help the team. So that's why I made the leap. And I really like the problem that we're solving. Our mission is to protect the next million families. And my background is all about how do you combine technology with legacy traditional industries and transform an industry for the better. And I saw that opportunity with Ethos in the life insurance industry, and we're well on our way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool part is you guys have your direct-to-consumer business, but you're also working with companies like us to build products and make the agent experience easier and better, which is super important. Like we talked about kind of in the beginning, to go full circle, I think the more that you guys do stuff like that, it makes the other carriers who have kind of gotten, maybe not stagnant, but haven't had the need to update the things the agents have asked for.
Right.
If you start doing it, it makes the whole industry better. And one thing Brian Adams always says is the rising tide raises all ships, right? And I think that that's part of what you guys are doing for the agent experience, which is super helpful for us and all of our team members.
It's hard enough to be a life insurance agent, right? So, and it's hard enough to actually focus on the sale. So if you don't have to focus on the sale, if you can just focus on your client and not focus on like the administration of the sale, and the technology does the rest for you, it's so much better.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm so excited about our business now is that we started out, when I started, it was, this will be 7 years this year. I've been here 7 years in July. When we started, we were a final expense, and really we were a mortgage protection and then some final expense company with a couple carriers, right? Now we've really evolved into a company that does mortgage protection, final expense, a lot of annuity business. We'll probably do $200 million of IUL business, $500 million of annuity business, a lot of simplified issue business, and we're able to service everyone, and the agents, no matter what niche they want to focus on, can find a home with us. And my favorite, when Marty started talking and I started working with him on things with you guys, his pitch, which was good and he's held true, is let's grow the overall pie.
Right.
Our goal is not to come in and steal from other carriers, right? Which is very rare in our industry. Like most people I talk to are like, how can we get business from this company or that company? And he was like, where can we provide value that you guys don't already have value? Which I thought which is helpful because it's not fighting over the same volume.
Right. Well, and part of how we think about that is with the ethos link sale,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sales that never happen, but there's clients that are interested. So,
Right.
we can expand that pie. I think that's where Marty was coming from initially by, helping you convert clients that you otherwise were not going to convert, right?
Yeah.
So, that's one piece. But I think the second piece is what you were talking about, which is, if you can remove the friction, you can make it easier to sell. You can sell more.
Right.
Right. And so that's part of how just like the instant decision product suite and beautiful, easy to use tools can make selling so much easier and so much more efficient.
It's just scalable business now. We have leads all over the country. You can work from wherever you want to if you're on vacation. Some carriers allow you to work when you're out of the country. Like you can really work from wherever, and you can work. I have one agent who they live on Pacific time. They start at 6 o'clock Pacific time, work Eastern Coast, and they do work 2 days a week. They work East Coast, and then they work all the way to Hawaii time. So they work like 15 hours, 2 days a week, and they write like $40,000 a month, and they only work 2 days a week. And so it's like whatever you want to make happen, you can make happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a really big year for us, for you guys, and I appreciate you spending time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.